Hello, welcome to my channel and thank you for being here. Today I'm going to talk about one image again only. Um, Sometimes I talk about two or three images at a time. And the caption to this image reads, Street Children in War-Torn Mozambique, Maputo, 1990. And this was one of the images I made in a several-day visit, probably there for about 5 or 6 days in 1990, early 1990, when I visited with the late great journalist Eddie Koch, working for the Weekly Mail then, and I was able to accompany him as a photographer. Weekly Mail picked up the costs of that trip to Maputo, whilst Maputo was still in the midst of a civil war that fortunately was ended not that long after. Um, Probably thanks to the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union. Because had the Soviet Union continued, that war would have continued. There's no doubt about that. But I think that the West, that was largely behind Washington, that was largely behind this war, recognized that they had the upper hand in terms of negotiating the kind of peace that they wanted, in which neoliberal interests continued to prevail, and that socialism was defeated in Mozambique finally. And a bloody war came to an end in an imperfect peace. So for these kids, and that's what war does, war, these kids, the socialism was meant to have um, made street children a thing of the past. But children became the biggest victims of that war in Mozambique. In that, very easily they became child soldiers, for instance, for the rebels, Renamo, who was supported by Washington and Pretoria, and and schools were attacked by those rebels, um, and teachers killed, and children abducted and enforced into becoming child soldiers. First carrying stuff for the soldiers as they for the militants as they went about their business and on their campaigns, and being sort of camp skivvies and things like that, and then finally actually pulling triggers and they made really good soldiers because they were fearless and wanting to prove themselves, and they were traumatized. They'd often witnessed the and been forced. We heard the horrendous stories of how kids were forced to attack, to kill um, loved ones, parents, elders in their villages. Um, in Afripix in the 80s, we were um, the recipients of a monthly package of images, photographs that came out of the Mozambican state media, AIM. I forget exactly what AIM, the information agency for Mozambique, um, um, of horror stories of the atrocities that were committed by the um, terrorist rebels um, um, against Mozambican people to force them to relinquish their ideas of socialism. And so health facilities, agriculture, everything that had been brought about by Frelimo and that great leader Machel was destroyed, and the country brought to its knees. And these kids that you see here, had their future destroyed before their eyes and were left traumatized by that experience. So this beautiful image, I mean, we were asking ourselves, how does Mozambique survive the brutality that it's been subjected to back then in a city that was fairly desolate and empty, and And I think it's testimony to the human spirit, and you see a little bit of that in this image, that indomitable spirit, the will to live and to live to your fullest. You know, the flower in this young man's. He looks like the leader of this little troop. You know, with his very stylish hand-me-downs that have probably come from Scandinavia or somewhere, a cold climate for the subtropics of Maputo, and a huge spirit to live, you know, is embodied in a couple of these kids' eyes, you know. And I wish them well. I wish that they, as many Mozambicans who live amongst us and were here as refugees and have gone back to Mozambique to continue to you know, be part of building their nation, even under all the adversities that we still continue to face in a neoliberal economy, is embodied in the humanity of these kids who presented themselves for an image in front of some stranger, some pale-skinned stranger passing by, that they had no clue. Maybe they, you know, they knew that they had to engage in a kind of a trade-off with people like myself, because that was the currency of the street. And so I'm hoping that I'm honoring that trade-off somehow by, you know, having their image in my retrospective as a one, you know, a single large spread cover in this retrospective call and responses, which I'm working from for the beginning of this project. And yeah, so I think to end off by saying that, you know, when we adults with our vested interests vie for power and for wealth and for positioning, there's always a price. And that price, you know, I mean, and I certainly would not, in notwithstanding anything that's happened to Renamo and the trade-offs that Renamo, I mean, Frelimo, and the trade-offs that Frelimo has had to make as their vision shifted, and as they had to come to terms with the neoliberal system, and the enduring corruption that is part of all neoliberal systems throughout the world. Don't fool yourself for 1 second that it doesn't exist in the North American countries or the European countries. That, you know, Frelimo did have the heart, did establish the schools throughout the countryside, did establish the health facilities, did establish food security, and did have the interests of these young people at heart. And we need to return to that. We need to ensure that we fight for the right for young people, for children, to be children and to have every opportunity to grow up to be fully functional, contributing members of the society they are part of. So I'll end it there and say thank you for watching. More information on myself and my work can be found on my website, a link to which, including my blog and email address, can be found in the video description below. If you like this talk, remember to click the like button and press subscribe. It helps the channel grow.